let's go.
All right, we're back. It's a beautiful Friday afternoon. Airing another Ship Talkers episode. I think there's been a lot of shakeup in the form of news in the industry, and that's because Amazon announced that they were going to get into LTL, and I think this is very interesting news. I'm not sure how to wrap my brain around it. I've got some thoughts like everybody else. I guess the one thing that I think of off base when I heard this was Amazon does not enter markets. They kind of dominate markets when they get in there. Like you see this where the stuff sold on their website and they start creating their own brands on top selling items, regardless of who the seller is. They in-house that, right? Like apparel and other things that they've done fantastically. They've obviously figured out how to be probably the largest parcel delivery service off of their own goods in the United States in a short time. So I think it is a little alarming, but I think like a lot of people out there, they're trying to figure out how to consume and take this. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on it, Curtis.
Yeah, they definitely on the parcel side, I mean, you can't just say there's only two parcel carriers anymore. They're
The
Amazon.
duopoly has been broken up because of technology, in my opinion, right? Now you have your on
Yeah.
track speedies and all kinds of stuff accessible through technology.
Right. So they entered the chat, so to say. They're a firm participant in the parcel market. I'm sitting here thinking though, like they haven't necessarily revolutionized truckload, and they jumped into that several years back. They've had a functional brokerage. They've got assets. They've got definitely a lot of trailers, some tractors in some places.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe that's not as visible because it's kind of, when you think Amazon delivery, something appearing on your doorstep in 24, 48 hours, you think parcel. So it's definitely more front and center. Um, it's interesting. I know. I'll say this for a fact. Whatever they think LTL is going to be like, they're in for something. It's not going to be as easy and straightforward as all the data and metrics and forecasting that they've done. Not to say they can't do it, but you know as well as I do, it's going to be something that they probably don't fully realize yet.
Well, and I'll agree with you there because too many times have I seen people come from outside the industry, assuming they know better and assuming that they can fix this, whether it be technology or operations or whatever it is, or pricing, right? And we've seen people put the carriage before the horse or do, as Todd would say, really dumb things at scale. And it's not good, right? And they learn the hard way that it's a very different animal. I think there's some challenges within LTL because of the fragmentation. There's a lot of players in the game. I think LTL is definitely due for some consolidation overall, the way the market sits today. But when I think about Amazon, right, and getting into LTL, when I think of Amazon, I think delivery.
Right.
Boy, do they deliver stuff and goods. What Amazon does not do, in my humble opinion, and I haven't seen this yet, and I could be wrong, is pick things up. And if you get into LTL, it is P and D. It is not and D.
Yeah.
So there is a pickup and delivery network that has to be mastered. On the other end of that, I think about Amazon's current infrastructure. They do have warehousing. They do have 53-foot trucks rolling everywhere. They do have their own power units, but they don't have LTL infrastructure the way I understand it or see it today. They may have cross dock facilities, but that's for that bulk inventory they're moving to distribution centers, not a cross dock that you and I know that we lived on with forklifts and 500 doors and stuff bumping around everywhere. So that's kind of what I think from the outside looking in is how do you get into LTL? Announcing it is one thing, but the organizational infrastructure of industrial real estate, trucks, drivers, um, and then even a sales force to some degree. I mean, nobody's been able to fully say I don't need boots on the ground. I can just use technology to do everything, which I think is a mistake others have made in the past with getting into LTL.
Yeah, I've got two. Yeah, good point. You got to have LTL for as small as it is compared to parcel and truckload. It's very end to end. You got to be as strong on the pickup side as you are on the delivery
Hmm.
side. No question, Amazon is a delivery enhancer, and that's been by brute force, by spending a lot of money building distribution and fulfillment centers, exactly where they need to be for quick delivery. Um, Part of me thinks though, like every time a radical new entrant comes to LTL and says we're going to change the game, it really just chips away at kind of the stuff around the edges with customer and freight profiles that the true core carriers maybe didn't want in the first place. Like I'm thinking of
Like
Flock
Flock.
Freight.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're going to change LTL. No, what you really ended up doing was taking a lot of those larger shipments that slowed down LTL carriers and gummed up their networks. And it's actually a really good fit. It can be two companies and two kind of quasi, similar modes that play well together. So
Hmm.
if you think, I mean, no matter who you are, Amazon or anybody else, you need density in your network. And so if they're, excuse me, if they're so focused on bringing product into these strategically placed fulfillment centers to then get out the door quickly for home delivery, they're going to have to look for other business that that runs in that similar pattern or footprint, and they don't have true cross stocks. So as far as I know, they haven't been buying any of these yellow cross stocks. That actually would have been a good signal if they had suddenly bought a bunch of those. Then okay,
Yeah. Well, those
premium
already got
business.
yard sailed.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some left. I think there's still close to 100 left, honestly. But they're so like if every Amazon fulfillment center is full of their goods or their Amazon sellers' goods, like what are they going to do? Buy a carrier or start a carrier just to service themselves, or are they going to have to like get external customers and other market share to stay alive? Where are they going to put all that? Where are they going to cross stock it? So that's one thing to consider. Secondly, how is this any different than UPS buying overnight and FedEx buying, you know, American Freightways? And now we're about to see the second of those two examples get divested, and they basically have come to the conclusion that it's very, very difficult to run a significant LTL operation as part of a parcel company.
Yeah, but when I look at the long-term strategy of what UPS did when they gobbled up overnight was probably more predicated on not getting into LTL for the long term as it was about getting union leverage, right?
Right.
Because UPS Parcel is a big union provider, and with overnight, they wanted to get into that. The union did. The Teamsters wanted to get into overnight pretty bad. And by doing that, UPS, when they bought overnight, they were able to leverage and get out of that horrible shared pension plan that was going to sink them with the other failing companies. And that was really, when you unpack it in the long term, in my opinion, the leverage or the reason to make the capital investment, because that was a bigger risk than purchasing the LTL company. Right. So, like, but you're right to the fact that it didn't work out for them.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
regardless of the reason, like you're right, that was a big play. I think a lot of it was copycat. FedEx had made their LTL acquisitions,
mhm.
bought American Freightways, Watkins, and done that 2001, 2, 3, and then I believe UPS bought overnight. A few years later. So there was a bit of like, oh, what are they doing over there? We should probably experiment as well.
Yeah.
But you're right. The union for the UPS side of things was definitely a huge play. But either way, neither one worked. And you could even point at Yellow in their history when things started getting out of control was this global seamless all modes type solution they were after, with YRC Worldwide Corp. They bought a carrier in somewhere in Asia and owned that for a little while. Like it's just tough to bring a seamless,
Hmm.
our solution fits everybody to the market and have it work.
So that begs the question. if Amazon announces they're going to get into LTL, how do they do it? And there's either true net new, I go buy the terminals, I go buy the infrastructure, and I build this house from scratch, or I go buy an existing player in the game. And it's not like there's a ton of people for sale. However, it is Amazon. So when you find out that there's a buyer like that in the market, it definitely changes what's for sale and what's not, at least in the known sphere of people willing to sell a company, right?
Yeah, so let's talk through that. And you and I, we have a lot of close relationships on the carrier side, and can't get into all of those level of details. But let's pretend that we're, let's pretend we're Amazon and we're looking at the top 10 carriers just with very public attributes of each one. Some are public companies, some aren't, some are union, some aren't, some are national, some are regional. Who do you think stands out as a good acquisition?
Well, I think the number one thing that people will jump to first, only because of the announcement of the decoupling, is FedEx, right? Because they're going to decouple parcel and LTL doesn't necessarily mean that they're up for sale. They're the largest LTL carrier by volume. They almost pick up 2x what any national carrier does on a daily basis. So my thoughts of Amazon buying FedEx is that network is at such capacity already. How do you fit your own products and goods, which is part of the reason I would assume they want to get into LTL, into that network? Now, it doesn't mean they can't do it. It would just mean, in my opinion, that if you're going to segment a portion of your Amazon freight into LTL and use that company you bought to pick up and deliver your orders, you're going to have to shed a lot of that business in the case of the FedEx example. Because if they're picking up 80,000 a night on that equipment and those terminals, right? You can't fit Amazon inside of FedEx without degrading or purging some business, which isn't a bad thing for the network today in the market because then other carriers would pick up that business. So if it
Right.
went that way, I could see it being very beneficial for the LTL game. However, now you have Amazon, one of the most dominant brands in the industry, buying one of the most dominant brands known worldwide for the last 20 years, which is the scary thing to think of. But it's also the most expensive purchase out there, in my opinion. If you're going to go buy a carrier, FedEx is absolutely going to have the most expensive price tag. You are not walking on a Toyota and Honda lot. That is a Ferrari or Land Rover lot. You know what I mean? You're buying a Bugatti at that point of LTL carriers just because of the size of the sheer network and volume.
Yeah. I think that would be one that would be hard to get pushed through.
I agree. But I think it's the first one people would leap to only because of the previous announcement that they're decoupling.
Yeah.
I think you're going to pivot to who Amazon is doing the most business with, which is also
Um,
a good silky
uh,
segue here.
yeah. Yes and no. I mean, well, so that's one metric, but also, there's a couple nationals too that I can think of that are up there with a lot of, they're large Amazon partners. Um, and then you have this network that Knight Swift has built out. Um, and at least one of those carriers does a lot of Amazon business. That's kind of like, they've done a lot of the heavy lifting and pre-built a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, we have to assume that like nobody gets into the LTL business because it's a cash cow business, right? Like it's got to be a practical utilitarian reason, and that's just to better control and better service my own freight, which
Mm-hmm.
Amazon has well over 1 billion of their own LTL moving in and out of their facilities as is. So capital intensive business, not huge margins, unless you're one of just a couple LTL carriers. So yeah, it's got to make sense. The network has to fit with where they are. Um, and then I would have to assume they're going to tread on the like the union free side of things, I would think.
I would think
Um,
from a pure cost perspective, they would want to do that.
right. Now, there's a whole lot of other, buzz in the industry right now with just how T Force is performing, specifically coming from TFI's CEO and just publicly saying after these Q4 earnings, it's been rough. We're not where we need to be. Um, Possibly even like they might be an acquisition target. I'm not sure, but
Hmm.
union aspect, I think that would prevent Amazon from taking a bite out of that apple, I believe.
A little bit. Yeah. I think if you were going to do that, you would want to just buy the assets and not absorb, unfortunately, the people in the union contract. But I don't know if you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I don't know about that. If that was doable, yeah, there's probably a few offers on the table already.
Yeah.
I think you get one, you get the other. Yeah, it's
Yep.
interesting. So, yeah, I think we can agree. Whatever they end up doing, it's probably going to take longer, be more difficult than everyone assumes. It's not going to happen overnight.
Hmm.
They've been sniffing around the LTL market for years. I know they've made offers in the past to some of the existing carriers out there. Um, and I would also say, and apologies to Amazon, but I think if they do buy any of the existing carriers, day one, that carrier is going to be worse off for all their other customers. I think the service will go down just from what you said, just pushing that much business through
Yeah.
an already, full network for all intents and purposes.
Now, the good news is, though, with the way the market sits today and the open capacity out there, that shed of business would have a trickle down beneficiary aspect to a lot of carriers in the industry and actually right side and bring a positive influence. Now, I don't know because there's only so much freight that's out there, right? That they pick up every day. So when you think about it like this, like if Amazon were to shove that into a carrier network they bought, they're really just shifting the freight they're moving with their contracted carriers today into said carrier that they purchased. So
Yeah.
it's, you know what I mean? It's really just a merry-go-round of where the freight goes.
Yeah. That's not net
It's
new
not like
freight.
it makes more freight.
Right. Yeah. It's coming from somewhere to then be consolidated
Yeah.
into whatever carrier they buy or start.
Hmm.
So it'll be a shift of
Yeah.
volume for sure.
But I do think it's interesting when you talk about, Knight Swift coming in, buying AAA Cooper, AAA buying MME, buying DHE. And the way you position it, it's almost as if Knight Swift enters this realm or industry as a private equity company that has just purchased something for a period of time to grow it and sell it for more and step away from LTL, bring a lot of money to their shareholder values in the form of, this sell of a company for whatever, let's say 5 or 10x what they bought it, and just making numbers up. But I could see that avenue playing out. Now, I know nothing about this. This is just armchair opinions. I have no insider knowledge whatsoever. I'm just totally looking at all angles like you. And when you said that, it made me think and put on my private equity hat and looking at it from that side of the fence.
Yeah. No, likewise. We're just spitballing here. Um, yeah, I mean it again, sentiments change. Night Swift has had a CEO change since all this started happening on
Mm-hmm.
the LTL side. I don't know if the perceived or projected efficiencies have come to play with when they first bought AAA, and then we're talking about a future national network. There was a lot of potential upside, and I'm sure some of that has played out with both ways,
Yeah.
with having real estate and brick and mortar facilities for all their truckload drivers to have as kind of hubs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things from where they get fuel to overflow if they need, if somebody on the road is nearby and AAA has 10 extra trailers out of a terminal in their schedule that night, they can pick from kind of a driver pool. So I don't know how
Yeah.
much of that is actually happening behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, those quarterly updates come around pretty quickly. And, when you're getting, if you're getting a beating there in with your shareholders quarter after quarter,
Yeah.
um, things change quickly. So
Yeah. Well, I look at it like this too. When any LTL carrier, I don't know I don't care who you are, when you pick up a large chunk or volume commitment from Amazon in whatever region or area of the country you are servicing on behalf of them, to your point, you absolutely make equipment and capacity constraints for the local market that you were previously servicing at a probably high rate. There's going to be a degradation of service because Amazon gobbles up so much capacity and equipment, right? And they'll give you lots of freight, but it could be at a detriment to that local market you were already servicing.
Exactly. I would almost bet that effect to some level will happen because
Yeah.
Amazon. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of the very profitable national LTL carriers are cautious with the amount of Amazon involvement. You know, there is a known reputation for certain fulfillment centers being a black hole for spotted trailers, and as Prime Day rolls around and the holiday, boom, it's taxing. It takes a toll on just available capacity and equipment. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's something real, that you suddenly shift all of this kind of distributed Amazon LTL business amongst a number of carriers right now and primarily funnel it through one network.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it wouldn't happen overnight, but it's that network is gonna it's gonna dip. It's like a wave. They
Mm-hmm.
will kind of feel the downside of all of that new freight. And is Amazon an LTL shipper of choice or a customer of choice? I don't know. They're large,
Yeah.
but when you look at turning equipment around in a timely fashion, paying on time, just all the upstream, downstream effects of engaging with an LTL carrier, I don't know that they're on the top of
Yeah.
anyone's list as far as an ideal customer or partner.
I mean, listen, Walmart's big. Doesn't mean I love shopping there. So I hear you loud and clear. But and this goes back to my other point that LTL is ripe for a level of consolidation. There's probably 80 something common carriers that do some form of LTL in these very niche markets, right? California is a prime example. You have tons of little small inland empire, California exclusive carriers. I don't care what part of the country you go to, whether it's the Midwest or the Southeast, you have these. So does Amazon get into the game and just hodgepodge and gobble up, you know, bunch of small carriers? Do you go by like Roy Miller, a standard forwarding type, or and I realize standard forwarding just got purchased by Jack Cooper, but like that example, do you just go back and buy a bunch of these smaller ones and go, boom, here's all my terminals, all my assets. I can do that non-union. I can buy all these guys. Obviously different price points. They got the money. Do they go out there that way?
Yeah, that's a real possibility as well. I mean, definitely, I would say up front, easier and probably cheaper to get into the market. I think longer term, you have all these little siloed companies and integrating all of those together onto standardized systems and
Well,
processes.
what you just said, period, is going to be a hurdle, regardless of if I buy one carrier or 10 carriers, is the back end tech infrastructure and systems. And we've seen this with current M&A in the LTL industry,
Yeah,
right? I know firsthand that like even the path AAA Cooper is on, when you buy an MME, when you buy a DHE, you're changing processes and train. There is a lot of change management to get that humming along right. And it's not like LTL is built on what I would call modern technology.
right.
They make it work and they do a damn good job with what they have,
Right.
but
Yeah.
merging multiple carriers together is hard because you got to still pick up and deliver every day while simultaneously changing processes and systems on the back end.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually a company out there, CLI, that is the technology infrastructure for a lot of small to mid-size LTL carriers.
Mm-hmm.
Might be a strategy. Just go go see who's all on the same tech platform.
Yeah.
Might be a bit of an easier roll up, but of course the geography has.
Or is Amazon thinking of LTL not the way you or I do and thinking of it like Flock Freight does? Where listen,
Right.
technically I'm LTL because I'm moving less than truckload, I'm just moving 3 moves in one truck. I'm not rehandling it and treating it like milk runs.
Right.
And they
Yeah.
have more of that type of infrastructure today than what we have talked about previously about the true LTL spoken hub P&D infrastructure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because when they did the announcement, they weren't like crystal clear
No.
on defining, hey, I'm getting into LTL. Well, what do you mean by that? Shared truckload or real LTL like you and I see it working with, Old Dominion, Sayas, and Knights of the world?
Yeah. No, very true. And then when you think down that path, now that they're not just buying their parcel capacity, they are their own parcel carrier. They've got that whole pool of volume as well, where they could start optimizing, combining,
Zone skipping that
zone
stuff.
skipping, yeah, palletizing parcels and throwing those on an LTL carrier. So, yeah, the
Now
true
that what you just said is where you can actually create more LTL shipments
right, that would be
because
net
of
new
that.
LTL. Yeah,
Yes.
wow.
Either way, I think it's shaking things up, and I'm curious. I haven't personally talked to any of the executives at LTL carriers that I work with or deal with on this subject yet. So I haven't exactly got the inside scoop from anybody on their thoughts or opinions on this. I don't even know if they've even talked to them from a purchase standpoint or acquisition standpoint. Again, pure armchair. This is just you and I wondering the what if, right? Shaking the magic 8 ball.
Yeah, I would say, like I've said before, any potential shakeup, whether deemed good or bad for the industry, is good just to keep everyone with fresh eyes and everyone on their
Mm-hmm.
toes. Hopefully it doesn't take another COVID type era. Nobody wants that. But I will
Don't say
say
the
that,
dirty C word. I don't want to hear that again.
but the point is, every carrier got better because of that happening. They had to.
Mm-hmm.
They had to get more efficient. They had to operate with leaner labor pools. They got better. So, any potential, if really any LTL carrier should have kind of a very task motivated, like, risk assessment team that said not only is looking, I know they all do for the financial stuff and claims and all the administrative side, but an operational business model risk assessment where they should just model out, like, hey, we're gonna pretend this year in our model that Amazon plunks themselves down right in the middle of the LTL market and blows things up. What are we going to do? How's that going to look for us?
Yeah. I mean, here's a crazy what if. What if there's a dark horse in here that nobody's even thinking about? What if they came in and bought somebody like an Old Dominion, your premium service provider, and said, I want to buy somebody who's already got this down to a science, right? And just gobble that up because it's less like problematic change management, everything. It's already a streamlined butterfly on the operational side.
Right.
That could be a complete dark horse nobody's even thinking of. And again, I have no idea, but it's all speculative.
Yeah, OD has, top tier technology. They build their terminals from the ground up. They're really nice facilities.
Invest ahead of time, right? I know
Right.
they're the only carrier here in Arizona with 2 terminals. Like
Yeah.
they invest 4 years ahead, 6 years ahead often from an infrastructure standpoint,
Yep.
which is exactly where Amazon thinks 4 to
Right.
10 years ahead.
Yep. Well, I haven't done this, but it'd be interesting to take Amazon's network of fulfillment centers around the country and overlay that with some of the national LTL carriers service maps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who do you think, so just from a purely financial perspective, who do you think is the best investment from a, like, as far as the carriers go? You've got to look at market cap, current revenue. I mean, FedEx is, like you said, that's a big bite to
And a
swallow.
big brand to buy. You're going to pay for a brand premium there.
Right.
Not that Old
Um,
Dominion's not. It's just that FedEx is just,
well, yeah, global brand
it's, yeah.
versus like little old US LTL brand. Those are two
Mm-hmm.
different
Yeah.
universes. But that's where some of those, like, what I would call mid or upper mid tier carriers, uh, like a Saya or an XPO or somebody like that, might have a lot of the boxes checked with just value, what you're paying versus what you can grow it to. The
Hmm.
problem I see there is both of those carriers are like aggressively, growing their own brand and growing their own footprint. And it just doesn't make sense to me that they would suddenly divert and say, well, we're gonna sell. I feel like they're in it to win it. They're
Well, yeah, I'm with you. This was just again purely speculative, but like if you wanted to buy what a lot of people view as the best in the market, right, and the least amount of like I got to make it better.
yeah. So switching gears, I mentioned T Force. I read something that Mr. Bedard, their CEO, mentioned in this call. You remember a couple years ago, there was some talk that they may acquire ABF Freight and kind of have that, both union companies, that merger. And he basically said, we're basically walking back our big plans of any big acquisitions in 2025. Um, but they may be looking for some sort of brother or sister company that would be bought by TFI potentially, but not directly swallowed up by T Force, in the asset light realm.
Yeah.
So like the Roadrunners, the Daylights, the STG now owns a bunch of those.
Hmm.
The former Frontline Freight, Clear Lane Freight. That could get interesting.
It could, but as you just named about every one available, which is not a lot of those anymore,
Right.
So like that'll be interesting in itself. And I don't know of any of them that are really up for sale. Not that, you know, it comes down to if there's a good price, anything's for sale.
Right.
So, but I'm interested to see what happens with that because obviously, like you've seen the announcements. It wasn't and hasn't been the path or success that they thought when they took this animal on.
Yeah, what I've noticed, what stood out to me is when TFI first bought T Force, um, the messaging coming from the top was, we're too bloated, we've got too many terminals, we need to cut costs. And this was during COVID. Said it again. 21, 22,
Hmm.
somewhere there. Now the messaging is basically all on sales strategy and how Bedard is saying, hey, we need our salespeople to seek customers and shippers that are in similar areas, like build up the
Closer to
density.
the terminals, I believe is what he said.
Yeah, and near other existing clients.
Hmm.
Um, I
Which,
I'd
to
be
be fair, is what
interested.
every carrier wants because they reduce their costs, increase density, and increase stops per hour and everything else.
Absolutely, but like my thought is, you got to do your due diligence first, like before you
Hmm.
get essentially the pick of the litter with customers, like an OD can do, is like, hey, we really want to go after this business. They have a strong value prop behind them. You got to like look inside. So okay, you cut a bunch of costs, you move some people around, you're a leaner company now. I don't think you can jump straight from that to just, now we're going to pick off the customers we want to get that optimizes us.
Hmm.
uh, you need to spend some time, investing within. Like OD has spent huge amounts on capex continually for years and years. You got to have the best equipment, you got to have the best training, you've got to make sure that internally in your docks, like you're spending money on straps and airbags and
Hmm.
dunnage, you're training your people correctly. Because when you have that service and that reputation to back it up, then you can walk into any shipper you want, and as long as the price is in the ballpark, you can pick them off.
Yeah.
I just think they've leapfrogged. They've kind of missed that. And not to say they're not working on that. I mean, I know they've hired, especially on the pricing side, a lot of really good people, that have come in from other carriers, and they're definitely making strides.
Hmm.
I'm just more saying from the messaging from the top. I'm always sensitive to this. Like some CEOs of publicly shared companies, they're only ever talking about the shareholder value and the stock price, and that's it. And they never talk about the customer and service. And I noticed that. Um, so here it's not quite that, but it's almost like Bedard, way up at the top. He knows what he thinks the company needs to do. I would love to hear him talk about like customer satisfaction scores and service metrics and like really nail that stuff in the middle that then, leads downstream to easier, more strategic selling in the market.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you look at the inverse of that based off some of the quarterly earnings reports, because I think most of the T4 stuff you're mentioning came out of, the quarterly earnings and his announcements based off of those earnings. And then you flip over and look at XPO, who lowered OR again, continues to do a phenomenal job gobbling up that localized market, as I'll call it, and is continuing to really grow and improve service and what you just mentioned, everything in the middle, the customer satisfaction and all of that. So there
Yeah.
have been, carriers out there that are really figuring this out. Again, comparing those two is different, right? Like even from a network size and seller size and terminal size, they are different. But I've been really impressed with what they've done.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your point. They're kind of focusing, they're blocking and tackling.
Mm-hmm.
And like really it comes down to what you do in the terminal, which is the one place that your customers typically don't have visibility to, except for the odd, lunch and
Yeah.
learn or terminal visit. That's kind of the black hole in LTL. But ironically enough, what you do there and how you train your dock workers and treat your customers' freight and organize it and process it and get it routed on the right line haul schedule, that's often the big difference maker.
Oh, and I remember that. I remember when I worked at Best Way, which became Redaway over the whole USF merger, um, being on that dock, knowing that if I made a will call, I couldn't get my forklift back up the dock because of the giant pothole at the dock ramp. Knowing how we would like not load everything out for service that night, how we didn't airbag and brace things is nice. Then I go to an Old Dominion dock, everything's RFID, digital manifest. Like when I was hostling, I did like a third, maybe two-thirds less moves when I was turning the dock and setting it up between inbound and outbound, pulling trailers. Like the level of efficiency when you mentioned blocking and tackling, it is all the little things. Like you don't build a big brick house unless it's one perfectly laid brick at a time.
Yeah.
And that is something they have just figured out. And you could tell XPO is very much focused on those attributes of blocking and tackling, which is no surprise with their addition of Dave Bates, and they have some killer operators over there too, right? They have Tim Staroba, they have Tony Graham. They know LTL. They're lifers, they're long timers, and they know culture.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think the last like big missing piece for them, which is also being corrected now with, the buying of real estate and strategic locations, building some break bulks, was they were just never fully integrated from all the regional Conway carriers back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, a lot of, you know, top freight operational folks. But sometimes it takes fresh eyes, like a Dave Bates coming in and saying, "Hey, we're doing a lot of things right, but let's focus on this. Let's spend money where we need
Mm-hmm.
to." Like a lot of carriers, I've been to so many docks over the years, and you can't take anything for granted. Like the way you and I did things on an OD dock, or the way we've seen, XPO or others do things. You go into other carriers and other docks, there's no dunnage anywhere to be found. There's no protective supplies, straps, airbags, the racking
Or the little
system.
airlines to blow up the bags at each dock door, right? Just little
Right.
things like that with like your snow shovel and your broom at every door to clean things out and make sure it's tidy and nice.
Yeah. Yeah, like a Lean Six Sigma or a Kaizen expert could have a
Yeah.
heyday at most LTL terminals,
Mm-hmm.
because it very much is like it is very similar to a manufacturing floor. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of repetitive work.
Yep.
where you place things, where your dimensioner is installed. Does each forklift have a scale, or are you running all over the dock to a centralized scale location? Are you paperless on your dock, or are you having to go back and forth to the dock shack all the time? Definitely all those things add up.
Oh yeah. For sure they do. So I think it's interesting what's transpiring in the LTL industry right now. I do know one thing for sure. Everybody's hungry for more freight and they are absolutely in growth mode. I think things are starting to tick up a little bit. I'm hoping to see that really ramp up in Q2. I do, though, think things will be somewhat stagnant for most of the year, but will be better than they were in 24.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 2025 is, from a carrier perspective, for sure, kind of the year of, you know, not only growth, because obviously that's a two-part dance that takes the shippers and, the freight volumes in general growing.
Need some economic headwinds in your favor.
Right. But even without that, these carriers are ready.
Hmm.
They're terminaled up, they've got the
Yeah.
capacity. Um, their technology keeps improving. Even the stuff like the industry in general, with the stuff that the digital council's doing and getting some of these standardized API calls, just cranking away on those. I've obviously always been bullish on LTL, but 2025 is pretty damn exciting and pretty bullish.
Yeah, I think 25 is going to lay a lot of groundwork and infrastructure for efficiencies that do not really transpire and start getting the rubber to the road until 26. But just to lay the groundwork and standardize a lot of that stuff, which the NMFTA is doing, is fantastic. Standardized invoice APIs, the e-bill lading APIs, preliminary freight charges, pre-pickup visibility, things that have been needed to put LTL on par with parcel from an asynchronous visibility standpoint.
Yeah, 2026 will be probably the year that stuff gets tested. Everything
Yes.
you can build away, you can build a house, when the weather's great. But when the winds come, when significant volume ticks up again, networks get more constraint. Hiring is harder to do. Retaining of your dock workers and drivers gets tough again. Um, it'll be real interesting.
Yeah.
I agree. 2026 will be the year of kind of testing that growth, from this year. The networks are growing, the
Hmm.
capabilities are growing, but you've got to have this symmetrical relationship between demand and capability to really test what's been built.
Hmm. I'm with you there, man. So a lot of shakeup going on. I know the Amazon thing caused some ripples in the industry. Definitely lots of opinions I've seen blasted out there. Um, Anything else you got to add, Curtis, on this one before we wrap it up? Any other news or hot items?
No, I think it's a good place to leave it, to be honest. And we'll just have to get back on the saddle and do another one here before too long, and maybe get into some more granular levels. But
Well,
yeah,
how about this?
Amazon.
What do you got going on at Rate Hero, amigo? What's on the forefront at Rate Hero?
Rate Hero. So, excuse me. Um, our vision, our mission has really even continued to evolve, and I realized we are in the business of relationships in the LTL world. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of old technology. I've always called it fake automated. Because what we use for rating and different
Formation.
things now. Yeah, I mean that stuff's been around for decades now. But a lot of that stuff just almost there, but not completely correct or accurate.
Hmm.
All the right context isn't applied. So right here, we're building services, products, technology tools to make LTL carriers have better relationships with their shipper and broker clients. So we offer services on everything from, engaging with carriers, doing bids the right way, collecting the right data to give to your carriers. A lot of the focus is on shipment level data, making sure that's
Yep.
correct. We've got this routing validation tool, Ship Test, that's ready to hit prime time, and that's aggregating basically all of the constraints, all the reasons why carrier A might not be the best fit for that shipment from a location level, from a retailer routing guide level. We're aggregating all the big retailer routing guides and making sure that, you know, hey, I pulled a quote based on zip codes and I got 15 different carriers that gave me a price, but based on the actual true consignee and location and day of the week and all these other factors, that wipes out 10 of those carriers. And it's only this small group that's actually a verified viable option.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool piece of tech that we're building. We're building a solution to sit on top of the standardized eVOL API call called the Better BOL. So more to come on that. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff going on, and hopefully we're aligned with the carriers in 2025 being somewhat of a growth year for Rate Hero as well.
I hope so, man. Well, cool. That's awesome to hear what's going on over there. We will have to jump on here, same bat time, same bat channel here in a week or two and continue riffing and having some fun.
Let's do it.
All right, man. Thanks
All
for
right, man.
hopping on with me, and we will keep jamming on here in future episodes.
All right. Take care. See you next time.
Cool. See you, Curtis.
See you.